This episode is sponsored by Sourcing Playground. Sourcing Playground is an online platform making it easier for brands to connect with compliant, ethical and sustainable manufacturers. Think Match.com but for retail. You can post your project for free and let the suppliers come to you. On the platform, you can easily compare quotes and factory profiles to choose the right supplier for your brand. Sourcing Playground are offering a free upgrade to the Fashion Feed listeners, which means your project will only be viewed by the factories and hidden from public view. Go to www.sourcingplayground.com to check it out and mention the Fashion Feed in the chat box. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Fashion Feed podcast. This week I'm joined by Katie Towle, who is a fabric sourcing expert, and I met her when we were both at Next, like probably coming up to 10 years ago now, and we both sort of moved back down to London at the same time and have stayed in touch ever since. If there's anything you need to know about fabric, Katie knows it. She is like the one and has worked in fabric sourcing and fabric design her whole career. So I wanted to get her on and just talk about how to choose the right fabrics for your brand, how to spot fabric trends, like what's big for 2020 and even for 2021, the best practices at fabric trade shows, where to buy fabric, which countries specialise in different things. And we also really have a look at like Katie's travels around the world and like the sourcing trips that she's been on. And then we go a bit nerdy as well halfway through and basically end up having a bit of a fabric lesson about the differences between woven and jersey and what a fibre means, what's a yarn, what's a fabric. And so you have all this information ready for when you go and speak to factories or fabric mills, and having the confidence to be able to speak like, even if you're not quite sure what the fabrics are, I'm hoping that you will a little bit better after this episode. And Katie also has a side hustle. She runs events in London that are swap it events. So you can take your clothes along and swap them. And they're so fun. I've been to most of them so far in West Hampstead. So you can get all the details for that as well. I'd say that's enough from me and we can crack on with the episode. Yes. Where do we start? Let's start by introducing yourself.
So I'm Katie and I'm a woven textile designer, and I'm almost in my 10th year, just coming up to, with having a fabric sourcing career.
Yes. And what is fabric sourcing?
So it is when you select or choose or develop materials, cloth or fabric.
And so whereabouts have you worked? Like, talk us through your career history to date.
So I started off really early on when I was actually doing my textile degree. I actually had the opportunity to do work placements.
Oh yeah.
And that's actually where I found out what fabric sourcing is. It's not really the kind of thing you actually learn about.
No.
So
I didn't know it was a thing until I started at Next, I think. 'Cause obviously that's where we met.
Yeah.
All those
exactly.
years ago. Yeah.
And that's exactly how I found out. So I'd gone out as a designer to do lots of work experience, actually weaving fabrics, doing print design, and then I ended up actually doing quite a commercial fabric role as a student. And that's when I realised actually I could be really, really creative, but in a commercial environment.
Yeah.
Which definitely at the time kind of stuck with me, because although I'm ultra creative and love designing, I couldn't necessarily be too isolated in terms of my personality, because I do like interacting with people.
Yeah, and as a designer, I imagine this, like I've seen girls before, they just come in at 9 o'clock, put their headphones in, go out for lunch, come back, go home. Like literally don't talk to anybody.
Exactly, and some people really get in the zone. And
yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong, I like having those moments, but I couldn't do it day in, day out. So this work experience taught me that there is a happy medium, to be able to think creatively and to actually be able to work and interact with people and kind of work through ideas together.
Yeah.
And then with the added challenge of actually getting somebody to be on board with your ideas. So how fabric sourcing fits into retail is that it's kind of like a triangle between design and buying and fabric sourcing. As a designer and a buyer, you actually pick up a lot of fabric knowledge, so you can select and source your own fabrics. So in a way, it's actually a niche role, because in some companies it can be really sought after, and in other companies they decide that they don't need it. So it's been really interesting for me to work out where I best fit in terms of the retail world, because there's some companies that it just wouldn't work. And then even when they do invest in a fabric sourcing team, you'll get some buyers who have a lot of knowledge in certain fabric types, same with designers. So you very much have to work with the people and kind of cater your knowledge to their knowledge and try and adapt your way of working.
So you're not patronising them or like bamboozling them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're actually adding value rather than actually trying to tell them that you know more than them. Because actually, with it being a niche, you definitely do know a lot more.
You can't let them know that.
You can't let them know that.
Even though it's your job title.
Even
like,
though you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I completely understand, because if someone came into my house and decided to critique it, I'd be pretty offended.
Yeah.
And I always think, particularly on the buying side, but, you know, they're buying a range which is, you know, from their heart, but they're being given a huge amount of money to make those decisions. The last thing you want is someone to come in and actually critique it, but you need them to understand that you're there to support it. So very much from the fabric side is that you're there to kind of confirm that the decisions are right, maybe help them choose new fabrics to update their range.
Because there might be one fabric that's like always sold really well, and then you want to be able to update that with something that's like either on trend or like does the same job but is a slightly different texture, or just making sure that it's always new for the customer.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're so into the nitty gritty as you are as a fabric sourcer, you see the detail, and with looking at kind of like a broader picture, as a buyer you've got a huge handful of things to deal with, and fabric is just one of them.
Yeah.
And that's one of the decisions. So you're actually there to help support that, but actually point out what you think is quite obvious, but in a way that is to actually influence their decisions, so that essentially the company that you're working for or the range that you're building essentially sells and makes more money each season.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like anything, you want to go into a shop and buy something new, and fabric can be one of the biggest ways to make something updated and look new. And
especially if there's like a range where, I don't know, say a brand is like a specialist in t-shirts, like Gap for example, you know, there's not that much you can do with a t-shirt to update it, but or Uniqlo or something, you know, it's all about the fabric. And especially as a woman, I know you go shopping and you just go around touching everything and you go, oh, like this feels nice, or this feels silky, or this feels shiny, or
yeah,
it's such like a tactile experience, isn't it? And obviously when you say it, it's like it is obviously all to do with the fabric. That's like your apart from after seeing it, that's the second touch point that you have with the garment.
Yeah, and there's always something new you can do with a fabric. And then this is when it kind of gets more complicated, because are you doing it because it's new on trend, or are you doing it because it's a price decision?
That's the other battle that you have with buyers, isn't it?
Exactly. There's so much to it that you work with everything that's in front of you and you make an informed decision to get to the end result. Like most companies will have what we'd call kind of a volume range or core range that kind of makes more margin, and then maybe more seasonal products. So even within that, you've got fabrics that you need to update because they won't carry on being cash cows before they end up kind of sinking, so you've got to keep them bringing in that margin product, so you've got the luxury of selling seasonal product.
Whereas or like press pieces, say.
Exactly. And then you can kind of go to town and have a bit more fun with the seasonal range because you're doing less quantity, you've probably got a bit more cash to play with in terms of the fabric price. And so you just weigh up both, but the most important thing is that you're giving the customer updates, and they don't even know this is happening.
Yeah, I know.
Which is the beauty.
People don't even know there's like a team. You know, when you see comments online, it's like, you should do this in pink. Like, can it be available next week or whatever? And you're like, you have no idea the processes that happen behind the scenes to get that product from a factory to a shop floor.
Yeah, or why it's so important that you've bought that, because it took months for me to convince that was the right decision to make. So it's just a lot of it is influence. You've got to be good at kind of getting somebody to get inside of your head so that they really understand why you're telling them it's the most important thing that they have to do, and you have to get inside their head so that you can make an informed decision for them. Essentially get product that sells. And it's fabric, print, colour, all of them have something to do with it, and it's not always fabric that has to change, but you have to make those informed decisions with everything around you.
Yeah. So you started at Next. What kind of things were like part of your job role there? Like looking at trends was a big one. I remember you doing your presentations.
Yes.
They're always good.
I had to tackle the art of presenting in front of people, which growing up was never something that I wanted to do. And I'm proud to say that I did it and I conquered it, which is good. I really enjoy now giving presentations.
I was the exact same, yeah. We used to be like sipping Olbas oil or something, like just downing it, like
having heart palpitations like I've never had before in the most formal settings.
Like really corporate setting as well, and everyone's really so formal, serious.
Yeah, and then it's staged in terms of like the director's presentation, and then like the average Joes like us who used to come in, and I'd actually be more scared of that because they were my peers. Whereas the directors, I thought, oh, I'm young, they'll understand I'm trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, you actually have to show the fabric trends per season, and the big part of what happened at Next was it was about forecasting the trends and pulling the trends together and summarising it and in line with the season. I was lucky enough to cover men's, ladies' wear and kids' wear within that time, because they kind of touched on all the trends rather than delving so deeply into each fabric type. The job was very much about saying the top 5 fabric trends for the season, but more importantly how that affected the range.
Yeah.
And then that's where the money comes in, so how you rate it in terms of the importance, because it's going to bring you the most money or because it's a trend, and therefore you should have it in press so you're not behind.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be your money maker.
So once you had the trends, I remember you then like pulled them into piles. So like you'd have a pile specifically for the jersey team, a pile for the denim team, and you'd have like a little meeting with the buyer that was like a one-to-one with them. And then what would happen after that?
So as soon as the buyer and designers select fabrics, so you kind of shortlist a group of fabrics for the buyers and designers to actually select from, and you do that by selecting it from the supply base. Once you've done that, you give them kind of a short version of it, and they make their decisions. You actually start ordering fabrics for sampling, so to make your prototype samples, and that's how you basically start building your range. And then the sampling usually goes off to a factory, which it could be anywhere in the world. Very rarely does it actually physically come into the forefront of the buyers or designers, because it goes all the way out. So it's quite a virtual job in a sense, because you've got a small swatch in front of you. You have to translate that swatch when you select it into a garment, all in your head.
Which is so hard to do, like especially if the swatch is really small, like you can't see how it drapes, you can usually see like how transparent it is, but obviously you need different weights for tops to dresses to jackets to trousers. If you're bending over in leggings, you don't want to see your like pineapple pants underneath it.
Exactly, which is always a learning curve.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a big challenge when you're learning, is actually, and anyone can look at a swatch and say, I love that, that's great.
But the skill is in...
Exactly that, you've got to kind of you've got to envision how it's going to be in a bigger form. You've actually got to offer ideas, because something like a jumbo cord, which is obviously out there everywhere at the minute, initially, if you'd have shown that to a buyer and said, put that in a pair of trousers, they would have been scared, so scared. Whereas now they can visualise it because there's quite a lot out there, but you've really got to give your ideas of how it's going to be, and that's how you translate it when you're selecting. So everything you look at is, 20 questions in your head about, is it this, is it that, and that's how you make those selections.
Do you have any tips of how to do it, or is it more just through experience of like what fabrics would look good in what shapes?
Yeah, I think it's definitely experience and trial and error.
Yes. I've seen some samples that used to come back.
A lot of error happened, and you're like, and we used to call it the jet lag decision. So if you came back and saw a swatch and thought, I didn't choose that, you kind of just blame the jet lag. But at the time you were obviously in a zone where you thought, this is so going to be the next big thing. But it is a balance between history, so you know it works and you know that is for that product type. And if you feel so strongly for something, which is usually when a new trend comes in, and your job is to identify the trend and then watch the trend and then make an informed decision as to where it can fit within the retail world. then it's at that point where if you're not sure, you've got to try it.
Yeah.
And you've got to prove to yourself that that's the right thing.
And having the confidence just to say it might not work. Like, I know a lot of people are always terrified of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
But sometimes those random jet lag decisions can actually like have some happy side effects. You're like, oh, actually, I probably wouldn't have tried that, but it's worked
so
quite well.
Exactly. Yeah. And it really depends how you're looking at it. If you're looking at it from, I want the newest thing and I want my customer, they're always on board with my new ideas, you've got to give it a go. I've had the most confidence by, I suppose, years and years that have gone by, actually thinking back on my decisions and mapping out how they went. Obviously, there's a huge amount of pressure if it goes wrong, so sometimes you end up making a safe decision. But any bold decision I've made has I'd say 90% of the time proved to be the right one. And that's how then my confidence grew. And how then I know now when a trend's a trend. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean that anyone else is ready for the trend that I can identify, but I know that my instinct's right, and I just have to bide my time and wait for the right time. Yeah,
and if you don't have that experience, I imagine just going shopping is a good way to see like what are tops being made out of, like, and noticing patterns. I always say that about trends, like there's no sort of magic formula to it really. It's almost getting a tally book and saying, okay, writing the shop name and saying Topshop, say, and being like, these are the fabrics I've seen, and now I'm going to go to Bershka and see if I see the same fabrics, and then go to Urban and see if I see the same fabrics again, and then you'll start noticing patterns, and I guess just making sure you're touching everything. And
definitely be tactile. I mean, I always get shop assistants coming over to me straight away because I'm in there, I'm looking at the label, I'm touching it like as if it's some pets, and I'm really in there. I have a terrible social habit of actually touching people's clothes when they're wearing it, which I quite quickly learned that that's not always okay. And you have to get involved, and I've been so fortunate to have multi-product experience that it does become second nature. But you have to just, like you said, just make some really simple categories that you understand. As long as you understand and they make sense to you, then you can form your own information from that, and then you can start looking back and thinking, tallying it up, that is exactly what I'm seeing. And then when you go and see a supplier, if for example you go to a trade show, you'll start to notice the same categories. And then that's how you make your informed decision, because you either like it or you think, the market's flooded.
And don't be afraid to, when you do go to trade shows. I've seen people before that have gone to something like Tex Fusion in Islington or Tex World, and they think it's like an actual fair where you can buy the fabric there and then and like take it away with you, but that's not actually how it works, is it?
Exactly. It's basically a venue where suppliers can come and showcase their product to you as a buyer, and you make selections. You kind of get their prototype hangers, we call them, or swatch cards. And then it's from them that you actually get the physical fabric. I mean, there are
you might be able to order
shops.
Sampling.
Exactly, you can order sampling, and they want you to because it gives them a good read on how their collection's gone. It costs the suppliers a huge amount of money to exhibit, to have like even 3x3 square metre of space is a huge amount of money for those few days, that they need to get as much out of it as the customers do. And it's very much about working with the suppliers that you go and see, and I would say just interact with them as much as possible.
They usually are old grumpy men, but that's fine. And like trying not to take it personally. Sometimes I always try and say to people that it's not you, and that you almost want to expect a level of abruptness, and that's just the way things are. Like, it's not, I don't know, without trying to scare people, it's, you might say, oh, what's your bestseller? And he'll go, oh, that one over there, and he won't get up from his chair, but you've just got to roll with it, and like, okay, fine. Yeah,
that's a good example, actually. I remember being so nervous when I was so lucky to be able to travel so early on, but then you get all of these people communicating with you and talking to you like you're a child, and like you're a waste of time. And luckily I've always had maybe a retailer on my side that's kind of given me the credibility to be there, and I now have had a lot more experience working with smaller companies where you've really got to fight your worth on there, or just prove that you are, at the end of the day, you're a customer. If you went into any shop on the high street, even to buy groceries or something, it doesn't matter whether you're buying a chocolate bar or 10, essentially you're handing over your money, and that's what you're doing at these trade fairs, but there's no physical exchange. So I think you just have to own it. Yeah, would be my advice.
Get your Beyonce pants on. Yeah, Sasha Fierce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But also just be really nice. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Don't have a pretense that you are the best and biggest buyer and you can order something if you can't. They are there to make money like most people, but they have to have a certain amount of capacity to keep their fabric mills open. And they can also do small orders. So you've got to get the balance between knowing if some suppliers really just are in the business because they're a huge supplier and they have capacity and they fill it. The same with factories who are making your garments, and some fabric mills are there because they are about the next big thing.
Yeah, but and they're the ones that you want to target.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're a small brand, you want to target the people who are actually happy to do that, and people are happy to do any order, but you've got to ask questions. So I would always say is, you usually go on a stand and you get bombarded with questions. Like you said, you'll either get someone ignoring you because they don't know you, or they'll ask you a load of questions and you'll think, I'm on the back foot. Yeah. And, okay, I'm not worthy, I've got to leave. Have a good 5 questions ready to go.
Yeah.
I always have like a patter which just comes naturally now. That are my 5 questions I need to know before I even look at the range. Take control.
What are they?
The big 5.
The big 5 questions.
It might be 6.
Yeah, any question's good. Just so you've got a bit of a conversation starter. How would you sort of open
actually start having a chat about how's the show going.
Yeah.
Has it been a busy fair? How are you
just
finding
being human
it?
to begin with.
Just being human, but make it relative. And then usually they'll want to tell you that, it's been the best fair ever, it's so busy, or you've just come on at a quiet time, so they're justifying why there might not be so many people.
Yeah.
And then you might just say, actually today I'm just here to have a general look around. Is that okay? So again, just be really polite and ask permission, because people really appreciate that, although you absolutely have the right to go up and start selecting. And then already you'll get somebody on board and you'll get them to treat you like a customer. And the next questions are, what's your best sellers at the minute? Where do you produce your fabrics? Maybe you know this information. Most of the time I know the answers to the questions.
Yeah, but you're just being kind.
I'm being kind, but I'm also showing them that I understand, I want to find out more about them, so that then when I ask for something myself, they're more than willing to reciprocate. Very
and maybe
specific.
asking like who else they work with.
Yeah, so who are the customers is a really good one. What's your minimum order quantity? So you know straight away if you can work with them. Is there any leeway in that? That's an absolutely acceptable question, because of course everyone has a minimum, but it doesn't mean it's fixed.
Especially if it's been a quiet show. Yeah. Do
you have any orders that are running through for bigger customers that I might be able to add on to that?
That's a good one.
Could you show me? So you can really save your time by actually just getting them to show you 3 things that could really help you, because you've probably only got 1,000 meters or smaller to order. Just that's absolutely fine, and it doesn't matter. You don't need to know who the customer is. Sometimes they're happy to share it if it doesn't conflict with their business model, and other times it's just about you taking advantage of something that's already in production, which is better for everybody.
Yeah, and quicker for them, and saves time and money. That's all they ever want.
Yeah, I always ask, what are your best-selling colours at the minute? Because although they're selling you fabrics, they do lab dips for their customers. And so that could give you a little bit of an inkling if you feel strongly for yellow this season, and they show you a lot of hangers that are yellow. It kind of confirms a lot of what you've researched. So just very normal questions, make it completely relevant to what is it you can get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. This is such great tips.
Always be polite and kind. I always smile. And they've come from all around
the world as well, don't they? So sometimes there is a bit of a language barrier. And again, if they are a bit abrupt, like I say to people, well, imagine it was reversed and you had to speak Chinese. You're not going to necessarily put all your please and thank yous in there, because you'll just be happy if you manage to get the word cotton out in Chinese. That's how they feel backwards as well. So if it is a bit short, or like, just know that it's probably down to a language barrier. Don't take it personally.
Exactly. And I'd say that if you don't get an answer that you want, or you're not sure on the answer, it's absolutely fine to clarify it.
Yeah.
So many times during my more junior days is I'd scurry on off and and kind of get back to my desk, or even at the fair, and be kind of like, I don't really know what they just said.
Yeah.
And then you just have to go back and ask again, so you might as well just ask at the time. But it's fine to clarify, because like you say, a lot of it can be lost in translation. Working with people around the world, which is actually incredible, that you get to interact with so many people. Like, I feel so fortunate, because I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the job I had. And yeah, just kind of clarify if you're not sure, and if they've said yes and they mean no, it's probably because they don't really understand what you want.
Yeah, and a lot of cultures tend to say yes because they're terrified of letting you down as well.
Exactly.
And so they're like, yeah, and you're like, okay, let's just clarify.
Exactly. And they might never say no, so you have to get clever at re-asking the same question maybe 3 times, just to kind of get an informed response that you're confident with. Because really what you don't want is to walk away with an answer, place an order, and then ask the question again later and they say, oh no, we can't do that. Because actually you kind of think, well, you did tell me yes, but that's not going to get anyone anywhere further.
Yeah.
So you have all the information answered before you make a decision, and definitely before you agree to an order. Clarifying and summarising is always the way to do it.
And getting everything on an email as well. Like, if you have been to a trade show and somebody asks what's your MOQ and they say 100 units or whatever it might be, and you go, as per the show, like, thanks for confirming 100 units. And then you've just always covering your back.
Yeah, and one more tip I'd say after a trade show particularly, which I think would help anybody, is don't be afraid to thank them via email afterwards. So if you think that their aim is to have as many customers as possible come through their booth in 3 days, if you're the one that emails them first and says thank you for your time, I really liked X, Y and Z, and can we just clarify, you'll be at the top of their list.
Yeah.
Because their job after a show is to summarise and email out everybody. But if they've got 60, 100, 200 customers, and you might be the last on the list. So don't be afraid to actually chase and say thank you. Yeah. Everyone appreciates the thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially if you are making a small order and you do get bumped to the bottom of the list, but your email's already in the inbox, like, you're making it a little bit easier for them as well to be able to just reply to you.
Yeah, and just give them something to remember you by. Maybe talk to them and ask them questions about the weather in Turkey if it's a Turkish supplier, and then when you email them, just reference that.
Yeah.
Because we all know that these day-to-day things we do, I'm very much a visual person anyway, but I remember things by my physical experiences. And that's how I recall.
As well, when you pick up their business card, when you walk away, just write down what they were wearing. Like, if that's the way you might remember it, or the way the stand looked, or like he had quality streets on his table or whatever. There's always quality streets. But whatever will make you remember that person, because they'll have a Chinese name which you won't be able to link, or they're all called Bob or Dave or I don't know, and they've all got a grey suit on or whatever it is. So, you know, he had some fun glasses on, or we spoke about this, and then, like you say, you can then go back and reference that in your email. And if you didn't like them for whatever reason, just fold the business card in half, so that when you get home, you know, you don't need to follow up with that person, and you're sort of narrowing down your opportunities once you get back.
Yeah, I mean, on my trip books, particularly travelling abroad, I'd have done exactly that. And I'd staple the business card in a book, and I'd, for example, say 2 ladies, and then great showroom, great music, and horrible toilets, or something, because you always remember something by the toilet. Particularly when you're travelling in China. So you kind of, I remember going to Korea for the first time and writing sci-fi toilet because they were the best toilets I've ever seen. But amongst the jet lag and the craziness, that's what you remember. When I was back in the office, I could then visualise that that was that meeting. Now I know what I need to chase.
So obviously you've said that you've gone travelling around the world loads, and why are different countries making different fabrics? Like, what do different countries specialise in?
So yeah, you're right. There are different countries that are used for maybe speed and lead time, some for capacity, and some are purely for fabric type. So just as an example, you'd go to somewhere like Bangladesh for cotton product predominantly, and that can be woven or jersey. And that then also goes in line with the capacity, because they are a country that do huge quantities, and it's capacity factories, and it will be mainly cottons for chinos or t-shirt fabrics, whereas you'd go to somewhere like Turkey for...
He's in the toilet.
There's a cat in the toilet scratching. Yeah, you'd go for Turkey for fancy fabrics.
Yeah.
Mainly knitted fancy fabrics, whereas you go to Korea for a lot of woven fancy fabrics. A lot of metallic fabrics come from Korea.
Yeah, there's so much innovation in Korea, isn't there?
Exactly. Not ideal because it's slightly further away, so if you can get them in Turkey, that's probably better for delivery if you're manufacturing closer to home. There definitely is duplication in countries. It's not like you can only just get one type, and particularly as the world gets smaller, information travels, so people try and catch on to the next big thing. So you will find suppliers trying to imitate that kind of fabric, but actually they might not be able to really produce it. So this is where your questions come in again, is actually really getting to the bottom of what is their specialism. But if you want newness, Turkey is amazing. If you want premium, Italy, France, and if you need kind of good price product, go to China, go to Korea, go to Bangladesh, and India, of course.
What is your favourite country that you've been to?
That's such a hard question.
Yes.
To be
Sorry.
completely honest, and probably sit on the fence here, but in terms of my favourite trip, I would say is travelling to Turkey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just love it, and I love it because the suppliers are all really welcoming and lovely. The fabrics, you always come home with new ideas.
Yeah, that's true.
And you get so inspired by everything. It's just incredible when you get back, and I can't wait to show people. So I love it from that point of view. And if you're lucky enough to have a tiny bit of spare time, going out for dinner is always really lovely to actually find the local places to eat. So you actually find out about the culture as well. So all in all, with it not being so far away, it's always an awesome trip.
Yeah, definitely. And Turkey's good for jersey and wovens as well, isn't it? But are they different sides of the river? Like one, Bursa is for wovens, but Istanbul's better for, well, mainland Istanbul. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Istanbul tends to have jersey suppliers and a lot of tailoring.
Oh yeah.
Whereas Bursa, which is the other side, and it's almost a region in itself, specialise in woven textiles and car manufacture.
Oh, how interesting.
Are the two industries that they specialise in.
I remember the buyers, when they used to go to Istanbul, they'd have to get like a ferry over at sort of 5 in the morning or something. That was the only way to get there.
So that is the downside, and I've had probably 2 of my worst sicknesses on my trips from that journey, but I think it was a combination of the early morning and but yeah, so it's quite interesting because even, you know, you do generalise and you put countries, particularly like, you know, Turkey's good for fashion, great, but of course it has its own specialisms and its own regions that produce for people all over the world. Doesn't matter where you're manufacturing, but Bursa is a hub of woven fabrics. And what's quite interesting as well, which you probably wouldn't even realise by looking at the stands, is not all fabrics that you're shown are from that region, which is crazy. So we could go into so much detail, but a lot of Turkey suppliers, because they're known as quick response, they do weave their own grade, which is the base cloth. But they'll also send it in from China, and then they'll dye it and finish it in their factories.
Right.
And there's a price advantage on that for obvious reasons, because the cloth is cheaper from its origin country, and then you can still react in terms of lead time and getting the expertise on colour and finish from those particular factories. The same goes for India, Bangladesh and Pakistan. Like, you might be buying from a particular supplier, but the actual fabric might have come from one region, and then it's finished because of the technical abilities in that factory. So it is so in depth, which is good for me because it's kept me in a job for 10 years.
And you've seen all around the world.
Yeah, exactly. But then you get to know why you would choose a woven from Turkey, or you'd get it directly from China.
So when you're saying like wovens and jersey, I know we were speaking about this over lunch earlier, what is the difference?
Okay, so there's woven fabrics, as you mentioned, jersey fabrics, and then there is knitwear.
Yeah.
So in terms of just talking about woven and jersey fabric, so a woven fabric will have what we call a warp and a weft, which the easiest way to explain that is a very traditional woven basket that you'd find in maybe a homeware shop. And that's when one end of fabric crosses to the other end. So it's almost like if you were to interlink your fingers, you would get one over and one under, one over, one under in both directions. We actually
and the
call
warp
that
goes down and
the
weft goes left.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
I learned at school. Yeah.
So when you're actually weaving the fabrics, the warp is set up and it's there, so it's going from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And then the weft is what creates the contra pattern. And then how you get different patterns depends on the setting or the design that you decide and that you input, hence the different type of woven fabrics. So you would always start with a warp and a weft.
Yeah, I've just got so many questions. I'm like, and then, what is some examples of some woven fabrics, like a shirt, a pair of jeans?
Yeah, exactly that. So, well, I was going to say all jeans are woven. That's changed now because there's a huge knitted denim trend.
Like the jeggings.
Like the jeggings, yeah. But most jeans are woven.
Yeah, like traditional ones.
Yeah, most shirts, blouses tend to be woven. Jumpers are knitted.
Yeah.
A really good example. Coats are mainly woven, but again there's been quite a trend towards comfort, so people are using what we call woven look fabrics. So they're actually creating the woven look within jersey. And again, that depends on trend. So any supplier doesn't want to be behind the trend, so they'll try and imitate the others. So of course, if you've only got a jersey factory and you see that woven is on trend, because most seasons either jersey or woven will be tipping the balance in terms of the priority. So therefore the other suppliers have to kind of make their money somewhere else.
And what about jersey? How would you describe that?
So the easiest way to recognise a jersey fabric is that it's stretchy.
Yeah.
However, drum roll please. That isn't always the case because you do get woven fabrics that have stretch in them.
Yeah.
But jersey fabrics are things like t-shirts, again jumpers, anything that's maybe like a turtleneck, long sleeve tops, anything that probably fits closer to your body.
Like sportswear.
Exactly, sportswear, joggers, underwear. It's a very obvious but very good example because it obviously does fit right close to your skin. And if you're sourcing fabrics, the tip I would give you, which I got taught very early on in my career, which I'm very grateful about, is if you are not sure and you're looking at a fabric, and you can only actually do this with a piece of fabric, you can't do it with a garment unless you're going to cut the garments. Yeah. So don't do this if you're shopping. That's illegal. But if you actually look at the woven fabric and take the corner, any corner, you will always be able to pull two threads off, and that's by just picking the end. So if it's tightly woven, it's going to take longer, but you'll always be able to pull one, and it'll come off, let's say, the length of the square. And then if you pull the other side, it will easily come away, because as soon as you've pulled one, you've kind of broken the
basket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other one will come away, and then you see that there is a warp and a weft, and you'll see them kind of separating in front of you. And if it's a knitted fabric, you can only ever, however many times you pull it, you'll only ever be able to pull one thread off the end. Yeah. And that saved me from a lot of embarrassing questions when I was learning what the difference is between woven and jersey. Yeah. And I teach every intern that I have that's the easiest way.
And knitwear is like a really massive piece of jersey.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, that's a really good
It's like constructed in the same way as opposed to wovens.
So yeah, and when you look at the fabric, you'll see that it's more of a loop, whereas woven fabric is more of a linear, more of a square construction, whereas jersey and knitted are looped. But knitwear is what we call fully fashioned, which you start with a piece of thread and then you wait a few seconds and the jumper turns out the other end, which obviously isn't the case, but you do start with thread and then you end up with a garment, whereas with jersey and woven fabrics, you will always end up with a piece of fabric. So you'll start with a thread or a yarn, and you'll end up with a length of fabric, and then you cut that fabric and you stitch it into a garment.
Yeah. And whilst we're on the technical, like we're having a fabric lesson, I'd say the other thing that people get a little bit confused about is the difference between a fibre and a fabric. So if I said to somebody, what fabric is that? And they would say cotton, I'd be like, no, that's the fibre. That's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
So
you have fibre that's made into yarn, and then your yarns are used to create a fabric.
Yeah.
And they're the 3 steps. The yarn could be called the thread.
Yeah,
as
okay.
Well. So usually we say, what's the composition of this fabric? Which means that you're trying to find out what the contents are.
Fibre composition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Whereas the fibre is in its most rarest form before it's made into something that you could use to create a piece of cloth.
Yeah. So cotton, polyester, nylon, they're all fibres.
Yes.
And then are all yarns the same? I guess it's like 1 ply, 2 ply.
So yes, so if we go into the yarn side of things, you can have what we'd call, what you just said, 2 ply, which means it's double the strength.
Right, yeah.
But you can also have different thicknesses, which is where the technical side of each kind of fabric base. So for example, with shirting, let's just say, for example, menswear shirts, you'll have a yarn count.
Yeah.
So 30, 40, 50 and so on. You have a thicker yarn going from 40.
Right.
And so you might say 2 plies 40, which means using a 40s yarn, but you're twisting it together. So it's double the thickness.
Yeah.
And so that would be kind of like your cheaper fabric in a way, but then you're giving it extra strength.
Yeah.
And if you think about it in terms of, that's how they cost what a fabric is how many yarns are per inch on a woven fabric. So if you've got a 40s yarn, it's actually thicker. You need less of those yarns per inch.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's cheaper overall. Whereas if you have
really fine yarn.
Exactly.
You need
like an
more
80s
of it.
count or 120s, which is used for more premium fabric.
Like really nice bed linen.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
Or that gorgeous kind of like, I don't know which brand, but super expensive. When you say, I don't know why they charge so much money. Usually it's because the contents of that fabric is, there's a lot more, you get more bang for your buck, basically.
Yes.
So amongst obviously the branding and what you're paying for, a lot of it does start with the fabric. And the fabric can be is the most expensive part of any garment.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible position to be in if you're asked for a cheaper fabric, because on paper fabric costs so much in the whole costing of anything that you think that you can save the most on it.
Yeah.
It's always the first thing that people try and save money on.
Because it makes up the most of the total price.
Exactly, but it's not always the best decision to do that, to compromise on fabric quality.
Yeah.
But again, that depends on what it is you're offering your customer.
So going back to the shirt, you would have a cotton yarn, a cotton fibre with a 2 ply yarn, for example, and then it would make a poplin fabric.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
so
then
you'd have the fibre, the yarn and the fabric in that order.
Exactly, and when you're looking at fabric hangers, it kind of gives you all that information, but ask the question, because the people who are supplying it are the absolute experts.
Yeah, and a lot of them are super nerdy about it, and it's quite cute, like they get really passionate.
Yeah, it's cute, and then you can walk away thinking, I don't know anything about this fabric, because they've just given you so much information. But it's a very technical area of of the business, really.
Yeah, but going with information like that to a show, even if you're not 100% sure, like at least you now know the differences between a fibre, a yarn and a fabric.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then just the other thing to be aware of, I would say, particularly in like woven fabrics, is like you mentioned, a poplin. That's just one type of fabric.
Yeah.
And so you can have something like a twill, you can have something like a canvas weave, you can have what we call like a bedford. So there's lots of actual technical differences, which the easiest way to explain about what you need would be how you can physically see it.
Yeah.
So if some things have got a bit more texture, it's probably a canvas, or it might be an Oxford, which is like a typical men's shirting fabric. but again, you just have, if you're not sure, you don't have to learn every fabric type.
Yeah.
It's just that have a bit of a visual, because the first thing someone will ask you is, what are you looking for? And you might know, but how are you going to explain that to somebody?
Yeah, just take a picture.
And you can just say, I'm actually looking for a lightweight blouse.
Yeah.
Have you got any of these? And you know, they will be able to point you in the right direction, or say, actually, no, we just do trouser fabrics.
Yeah. Or if you've got a sample of something that you already own and you're like, oh, I really love the way that fabric feels, take that along.
Exactly. It's again just trying to get your ideas into somebody else's understanding.
Yeah. And so with regards to fabric trends, let's talk about this because this is a bit more exciting.
I love trends. I love fabric trends.
Yeah. What's coming up for next year or the year after?
Okay, so the big comeback, I would say, is for autumn winter 21 is going to be fleece.
Yeah.
So it's, I would say, kind of in line with the core trend in terms of it's kind of a bit of a nostalgic fabric, but fleece was my number one takeaway from Premier Vision that happened this year. And that's because the amount of fleece that I saw, but the new ways of using it. So traditionally, we probably all know that we probably have always had a fleece jumper, or it's quite an active wear fabric, it's quite functional, but it's being translated into more of a fashion outcome. So it's being kind of used for sweatshirts, for jackets, for jumpers, so it's actually kind of broadening its use, and there's different types. So I'd say definitely keep an eye out for new fleeces, because I think you'll get excited if you do that kind of project area.
So quite like an outdoorsy vibe overall, like the trucker.
It is, but it's being used as kind of what we just call fashion clothing.
Fabrics, yeah.
So traditionally the core trend, that's probably been the biggest so far in the last 2 seasons of kind of like what we'd say, it started off as an emerging trend and now it's just gone crazy.
Right.
And everything and anything is trying to replicate a cord fabric. But again, it started off as a very functional fabric and was a very basic trouser fabric, and now it's kind of emerged into this kind of anything, any use fabric, because it's a cool chunky texture, and it's a little bit retro. And so fleece is what I would say is the next one to look out for. I don't think it's going to be huge until this time next year. I think we'll be talking about it like we're talking about cord.
Oh, okay.
Because what I've noticed is there tends to be a bit of a 2-year gap between one big transition to the other one.
Yeah.
And this show, I'd say it's an emerging trend. And this time next year, I really hope to be in a position to say that's a confirmed trend. And when it kind of gets adopted by multiple brands.
And what about summer?
So summer is all about crinkle.
Yeah.
So texture, anything has kind of a 3D aspect to it.
Like a seersucker.
Seersuckers, yeah. So some crinkle chiffons, some cheesecloth. So anything that creates almost like a rippled effect.
Okay, yeah.
Is going to be the huge thing. And then
it's not like super clean.
No, it's kind of there's never always just one type. But the clean and the more tailored side of things is definitely the small part. It's all texture. And the number one thing that we'd say alongside that is natural.
Yeah.
So where you'd have, like, linen's been big the last few seasons, anything that replicates a linen look. That doesn't have to be the fibre that has the content of linen, but it might have a bit of a rustic feel. And it's kind of all of that natural side. And then on the jersey side, it's second skin, kind of super soft. So
modals.
Exactly. So modals, anything that basically makes you feel comfortable and protected. I think there's like a big thing happening, which it's starting with spring, and then when you go on to your winter collection, you'll realise, but it's comfort. We've gone from athleisure and activewear, and now it's kind of like we all just want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Whether you're smart, you're casual, and all the fabrics are actually replicating this, so they're all trying to give you an added comfort.
Like a soft handle or an extra stretch, or
exactly, or slightly peached finish. So like, put your hand on your leg, it's kind of like comforting.
Yeah.
A bit like cord is, and I think that that's actually just everyone's in a bit of unstable times at the minute, and I think, you know, fabric kind of goes along with that, and it's about having something that gives us all that little bit of extra protection. What I will do is I'll share with you my summary from Autumn Winter 21. I actually did a bit of a paragraph summary, so rather than just reading it now, I will share it with you, and it kind of summarises what I mean between the contrast between having that kind of softness and then there's a bit of excitement that goes with it, so that you're getting to a balance of two different things for the season.
I have seen on a few fleeces that they're mixing them with jersey or loop back or nylon, so it's exactly like you said, like the coziness and comfort, but mixed with something like that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, and all these trends do overlap, so how I would analyse it would be to kind of pull out what it is, but it doesn't mean that they're used in isolation.
Right.
So like you just said, like fleece is so important, but so is coziness, so it might be actually extra brushing of a fleece to make it the softest it could ever be. Because traditionally it's probably a little bit of a polyester feel, whereas now it's about, does it give you that extra softness?
Rather than that like blanket that you get in a B&B, you know, like that brown
no B&B blankets.
No.
And the same with look out for double cloth or double face. So it's about kind of playing with two textures. So traditionally a double cloth is when you have two layers of fabric which are interlocked together to make one, but you've got two layers.
Right.
Quite a premium fabric, because there's a lot going
literally
on.
Double the
literally
cost.
Doubling your costs. But what's happening now in terms of the fashion side is that suppliers are being quite clever of how they do that. So they're trying to make it a more commercial trend. So putting two different fabrics together and maybe bonding it. Or even in your design, you might replicate that by buying two different fabrics, but when you're cutting the garments, actually mixing and matching them together.
Yeah, and
to
paneling
create that. But it's about having kind of one side, almost like an added surprise.
Yeah.
So you might turn a collar over and you've got something different.
I quite like this whole make, do and mend thing that's coming through as well, that kind of links back to the seersuckers, I think, that anything that doesn't look perfect, so anything that looks like patchwork, that's a bit random, like you say, like, oh, I wouldn't have put that with that, or I think that will probably come through quite in a big way next year as well.
Definitely, and also imitating a traditional patchwork as a print.
Yes.
Which is really great for like the commercial side of things, because you can
like overlaying stitches on it or something to make it look like a patchwork.
Definitely, and even going back to texture is actually printing texture. So where normally you might just have a gorgeous floral design, it might be that it's really hand drawn and sketched, or it might be that it's actually painted in a way that it looks like the flower is layered onto a woven fabric.
Right.
So you're actually printing onto a very flat fabric, but you're adding that texture in the drawing.
Yeah, that's clever.
And again, it's just adding that extra beauty to the fabric. And you've got so much more versatility by doing that, because essentially you can draw what you like. But yeah, I think anything natural is huge.
Yeah, and like a handmade sort of thing, which is obviously good for independent businesses, because most of it sometimes is handmade.
And we are in a world where everyone wants to have some individuality now.
Yeah.
And I think trying to associate with something that means something to them. So rather than just going on with what you're told you should like, it's really having an opinion. And this is where startups come in, because you've got so much power to be able to influence the customer and actually mean something to somebody.
Yeah.
And not try and be everything to everybody, but really mean something to that group of people who really want to find out about your brand.
Yeah.
And fabric can be a huge way of identifying with a customer. And all I'd say is don't be afraid to tell your customer about your fabrics. I think the more you educate people now, the more you involve them in your journey, the more loyal they'll be, the more they'll understand where you're coming from. And it just gives them that recognition that you're taking them along the journey with them.
And especially if you have invested in a really nice fabric, like, please tell them.
Yes.
And because especially if you're only selling online, it's really hard to get that across. So doing like incredible zoomed in photos of the fabric, like front and back, especially if it's got like a really cozy brushed back, showing that, and like you say, just giving that education as much as possible.
Particularly if you're paying for it as well.
Yeah.
If you're investing in that material, because it means that it's going to make your product, the best product it can be, tell your customer.
I know, like, just because you know it, don't assume that they know it either.
Exactly that. And if it means putting an extra swing ticket on it, or like you said, just emailing it out and actually just informing them, giving them a little bit of a summary about what it is or how you chose the fabric. I mean, how did you come to choose that fabric for that jacket? Because you've had a process to get there.
Do little videos of you at the trade show, or like flicking through the fabric hanger rails, or like when all the swatches arrive back afterwards, like taking pictures, do a video of you choosing them, like do polls, which one do you prefer, this or this, you know, get them involved right from that stage.
Yeah, I think that's a huge USP for any brand, is to kind of get your customer on board.
Yeah. And lastly is this is like slightly to do with fabric, but definitely to do with sustainability, is your swap it events that you organise, because you're part-time fabric sourcing and part-time swap it queen.
Yeah, so in the last year I've become somewhat an event planner.
Yeah, why not?
Which I hadn't really had on my list, but almost 2 years ago I had an idea really of thinking, I've always had friends come around and look at my wardrobe and kind of say, oh, can I borrow this? Can I wear this? And I was thought, yeah, why not? Like, I felt so good that somebody would want to, or appreciated my taste.
Yeah.
And then learning more about the downside of the fashion industry, which we're all hearing so much about at the minute, being in the job I'm in, you know, I've got a real insight as to actually how many things are happening and how we really need to kind of make the best decisions we can now in terms of sustainability and making things, just making the best choices for the future. And so, I combined both those ideas and basically got a group of people together, everyone to bring their unwanted garments that they probably thought, you know what, I just want to throw them away. Yeah. To try and continue the life cycle of them, to actually get together and swap it. And that's how I came up with it. And it was basically really organic. It's become quite a big event because so many people, we are inundated with clothes. I still love shopping. And this is the thing that was kind of eating away at me, is like, I'm really honest, I like shopping. I like the buzz of it. I love choosing new things. I like combining outfits.
Touching the fabrics.
I love touching the fabrics, other people's fabrics. Yeah. And then, but realise, obviously, we can't just keep purchasing over and over and over again. And sometimes it's taken me a long time to actually really understand my style. But, you know, sometimes when a trend happens, you might want to try it. So what I kind of wanted to do is just make sure that anything that we were, as we would say, over it now, goes to a good home. And there's charity shops, which is an incredible way of obviously donating, which many people have done for years. But the honest truth is the charity shops are inundated with things that they can't utilise. Yeah. And textiles is one of the biggest causes of, like,
I think it's like the third biggest polluter on the planet, isn't it?
It's huge. And I just thought, you know, I can't change the world, but I can do my little bit. I love getting people together. Having a social event, like I say, I love clothes and I love shopping, so why not create a real life retail environment as basically a recycled area using unwanted clothes. Yeah. So people come and donate things, and then you go away with some items yourself, so you swap.
And you got featured in Time Out magazine recently. Yes.
Which I still haven't recovered from.
Yeah, we had the
biggest number that we've ever had. And it's just really exciting. So my little side hustle is continuing.
Yeah, so not so little anymore.
No, exactly. And the more I've worked on it, the more passionate I've become about it. And realise it just goes with all my strengths, really. It's like I love organising stuff. Yes. Event planning seems to be something that's come fairly naturally, although it's had its obvious hiccups. But just seeing something happening and a bit of a buzz around a room.
From it going it, like when we did it the first time in your flat, to then being in Time Out magazine, it's not even that. It's not even a year. It's grown so quickly. So it's been amazing. It's been a really good journey, and I'm having to kind of work out where I put my time, because actually I think that I want it to be a success for me because I'm very passionate about it, but I want to share it with so many people so that people get excited about owning and feel proud to own second-hand products. Yeah. Again. That it isn't
new isn't necessarily the best.
No.
You know, we should be proud to borrow something, to actually shout about that my outfit is, I've had it for 10 years and I keep swapping with this person, or I keep reinventing the style because, you know, I just don't want to throw it away. And I think, you know, I'm having to test myself of like really using things. I think the aim really is to use one item of clothing at least 30 times. And I particularly have been guilty of not even reaching 10. And I think the average person will use something 5 times before they discard it. And this is the world we live in. So,
So if people want to come along, how would, it's in West Hampstead in London, isn't it?
Yeah, so at the minute I've been doing it with the Village Haberdashery in West Hampstead. So we've been collaborating together because the shop is amazingly creative. It's full of passionate people who make and create. So it just seemed the perfect match with the swapping idea. And she's got a beautiful studio. So that's the space we use for the Swap It events. Just sign up. I've got a website which I can share with you.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, pop it in, and then if you just have a look there, you can read a bit more about me and why I started it, look at past events, and then click to sign up.
And where can people find you on Instagram?
So I am at by Katie Towle. So that's how you can find me. And yeah, I try and shout about the Swap It event and also keep you updated on fabric trips that I'm doing. So
all your fun outfits as well.
Yes, and all my fun outfits.
Second-hand outfits from now on.
Yes, I'm going to set myself a challenge very soon, but basically to get the most outfits out of 2 or 3 items that I have, and to challenge myself, because I do need to.
That's a good idea.
To do that as well. So watch this space.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. It's been great. I'm hanging off my chair. Oh my god, it's so much content.
I know, there's so much we could still talk about.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. And I'm sure people will be coming along to your events.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could rate, review and subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcast. See you next time.